Review of new applications, 2022-24 SP, Mill Pond Holdings LLC, 1 Cemetery Street, construction of 77-unit mixed-use development. This is a preliminary review. I don't know, Mr. Edvardsen or Mr. Grothier?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Steve, do you want to say anything, or should we get right into it?
No, why don't you guys go ahead, and then I'll jump in as the commission has questions and fill in any gaps.
Okay, so great. Good evening. My name is Matthew Edvardsen. I'm a partner with Spinnaker Real Estate, and I'm here tonight representing Mill Pond Holdings LLC. Mill Pond is a partnership between principals of Spinnaker and MF DiScala and Company. I believe both Michael DiScala and potentially Clay at this point have joined the meeting. They may be listed under my name. Unfortunately, I shared my link. Despite both firms being active regionally and nationally, they are both headquartered in Norwalk. DiScala and Wall Street, Spinnaker and Sono have strong ties to the community and a long positive track record of development and continued ownership thereof in the city. Together, we are presenting conceptual plans for initial review in association with a special permit application for the proposed redevelopment of 1 Cemetery Street in East Norwalk. This, as you all likely are aware, is what is now the former Wells Fargo Bank branch, the location being shuttered recently. This parcel includes frontage on East Avenue, Cemetery Street, and Gregory Boulevard, and is largely encumbered by impervious asphalt. The site also extends to the northern portion of Mill Pond. These plans in this application will also be referred to Conservation for review and approval. With the recent change in occupancy at the site, the long underutilization of the parcel, and in light of the recently implemented East Norwalk Village TOD zone, together with the extensive planning that led to that actual regulation, which encourages and allows for a more productive use of the site, we are excited to start the discussion this evening regarding the appropriate redevelopment of the parcel. The parcel benefits from its location in a diverse, robust community, inclusive of an abundance of public amenities and intense infrastructure. The primary directive to the design team is that the reuse of this site be additive to all the existing attributes of the neighborhood. We think these plans accomplish that goal, including pedestrian improvements, environmental benefits, expansion of the public realm, and an opportunity to provide a new public access point to Mill Pond. It also further diversifies the housing stock with unit size proposed that are skewed larger than a typical application. This, together with the accessibility, amenities, and maintenance freedom available with the proposed buildings, we envision existing East Norwalk residents, including empty nesters, being afforded an opportunity to remain in and continue to enjoy the neighborhood while simplifying their living arrangements. That said, we recognize that these plans are conceptual, and we not only recognize but hope that this plan will evolve as we proceed through this land use approval process and neighborhood outreach process. We welcome feedback from this commission, P&Z staff, the city's peer review consultants, various other departments of the city, as well as any other stakeholders, including neighbors. Our experience is that this openness and fluidity is not only necessary, but most importantly results in a better plan for not only the community, but also the future occupants and patrons of the building, as well as ourselves as owner/developer. Our larger team, infused with that desire for a collaborative effort, includes Adam Blank, our counsel of Wolfie Rose and Queskin, who's not available to join us today, Bruce Beinfield, Steel & Bather, and Colin Grothard of Beinfield Architecture, Craig Flaherty and Vince Hines of Redness and Mead, Bruce Eckerson and Mike Murphy of Eckerson Design, our landscape architects, and Hardesty and Hanover, led by Mike Galanti, our traffic engineers. With this being a preliminary review and to be followed by additional meetings, Colin will provide an overview of the proposed site plan, uses in architecture, technical expertise from a civil engineer, landscape architect, and traffic consultant will be available at future meetings. And with that, if there's not any questions now, I'll turn it over to Colin, and we'll all be available for questions or any early feedback and further discussion once he's through.
Thank you, Matt. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So as Matt said, we're excited to bring this preliminary plan forward. I should qualify that it's not a maximum build out. You do permit more density with the new regulations. It's being built per the regulations, 3.5 maximum stories. 77 units is the current unit count. There's an additional 2.5-story building being sited on the eastern portion of the site. One of the major difficulties being that there's an existing city or state drainage easement that covers a water course and sort of bisects the eastern portion of the site. So you more or less have two discrete sites that we're dealing with to not encumber that easement. We've got about 5,500 feet of commercial space and approximately 98 parking spaces that most of which are going to be concealed from view within the proposed building. As this is the site as it sits today, you can see it's largely impervious with a very small building on it, relatively underutilized. And if we look at this is a 1965 aerial that shows that this has been impervious since the 1960s. So we're dealing with, approximately 60 years of impervious surface adjacent to Mill Pond. So we believe the new plan here greatly improves upon that by pulling the impervious surfaces back from the edge, providing amenities as prescribed in the East Norwalk Village Transit District that was just created. So we've got rain gardens to help deal with water quality and infiltration. We've also got pollinator plantings in that zone to encourage the pollinators to migrate and pollinate the flora in the area. There are rain gardens, and as per the regulations, at least one of them is going to be a rain garden of interest, or I think they call it I forget what the term is off the top of my head, but an active rain garden where there's some sort of art installation with that. So there's going to be some movement to it when it's raining or shortly after it rains. You'll be able to view that. We're providing a public plaza in this area. So this functions as a pocket park off of East Avenue that would be available to the public. And then one of the things that's contemplated is providing continued public access down to this landlocked city-owned parcel. And this is just a quick stab at a concept of what could go there. That would be obviously subject to city approval since it is the city's land and city developing that concept. The circulation could continue around the building, and there's some discussion about some public parking access spaces on the site as well. The sidewalk would be greatly improved in the area, going from about 6 feet currently to 8 foot plus in some areas with some curb extensions. And we'll be working with the city and transportation, mobility and parking, as well as CONDOT to get these on-street parking stalls or hopefully in place. That would provide an additional 14 spaces to neighborhood residents, business owners, people patronizing the area. So we see that as a significant benefit to the neighborhood. We're also showing the separated bicycle lane and interior sidewalk that are encircling the cemetery, which don't exist today. That's initiatives that the city has indicated that they're interested in providing in this area. So working with them to accommodate those future plans. This project does reduce total coverage on the site and a reduction of impervious surface, as I mentioned before. So this is going to be a increase in the water quality controls and provide better stormwater management than what currently exists on the site today. Some of the other things that are there in the points category that in the new regulations is rooftop solar. We're proposing a 50% of the flat roof area be solar panels. Talking to the design a little bit, we took our design cues from many of the structures here in Norwalk, building on the history of East Avenue and East Norwalk in particular. We felt like this varied vocabulary provided a relief and a good composition at the southern end of what is essentially the town green. So if you look at most greens, they're boxed in on all four sides. This one's missing a tooth. And filling it in is going to really help to provide a more continuous district and let you circumnavigate the green, especially with the improvements that the city and the state are contemplating around 136 in the cemetery that we've been made privy to. So that's an exciting thing for us to kind of fill in that gap, provide a more expansive and engaging pedestrian realm and some public amenity on the streetscape that will more easily get people around this section of road and through this neighborhood, and you'll be able to get to places more easily. So that's a very exciting part of this proposal. Moving on to the elevations, as you see back from the previous image, we've got kind of a brick mass here to emulate a smaller brick manufacturing building or civic structure. We've got some flat parapeted buildings similar to what you'd find from like a downtown hardware store or a small lodging house from the turn of the century that would be fronting on the town green. We've got our take on a manor house, which is drawn from inspiration in those East Norwalk images, and then somewhat of an Italianate house here. This one would house the leasing and the resident amenity. This one over here would have the retail space. We have created a passage at the request of zoning to get to the courtyard. So you can transit from Cemetery Street through to the public courtyard, and behind the retail space, there may also be access there. So that's still an evolving concept, but we've provided the passage with the step up from Cemetery Street, and then you can circulate back out to East Avenue. So that's an exciting part of that plan. We've worked to develop these front stoops and provide some activity there. And some we'll have at least a few residential entries that front on Cemetery Street. Building B, as we call it, the smaller building, is going to be 2.5 stories, is kind of a little bit Georgian in style. So again, trying to fit into the neighborhood, and this building being on the easternmost portion of the site where Cemetery transitions to Gregory, it's stepping down the scale and the massing of the building to address and transition to the residential neighborhood. Felt like that was appropriate since the out parcel that we're left with after the drainage easement isn't significant enough to be able to do a lot with. This would also have some office space on the first floor. So hopefully it will be an active building throughout the day. And that's the end of the overview. Happy to go back and pull up any of the slides. I think the site plan is probably the best one if you have any questions for us to speak on. Thank you.
Yeah, and just add, I don't think we gave you the overall program. It's proposed as 77 apartment units and about just over 5,000 square feet of commercial space with kind of the retail space on the corner of East Avenue and Cemetery, and more of a service and or office space kind of as the site bends around towards Gregory on the ground floor of that building. And Colin didn't touch on it, but you could have, Colin, if you go back to that elevation, you kind of pick up as you're driven around this area. There's a big topography change from East Avenue as you go towards Gregory Boulevard, and you can kind of see that with that kind of angled line there, Colin. If you can highlight that, and we've tried to step the building slab to allow this building to kind of meet the street appropriately and not be kind of just pulled off the ground and not activate the street. And what's not evident here is that kind of behind this and below grade, as you get closer to East Avenue, is a lower level basement parking, and it's kind of completely hidden from the viewpoint if you're on the public right of way.
Is the mill pond polluted?
I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm capable of answering that one.
I would defer to staff.
Yeah, I can try to do some digging on that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Yeah, I've spoken to a number of people about the buildings, and there's a certain amount of excitement that they've generated. I feel a little bit different. Although it's the other side of the railroad tracks, this really is an entry building into East Norwalk. And I think it deserves to be as special as your economics will permit. And at least in my view, looking at your preliminary drawings, and again, just my opinion, I'm not quite sure that it measures up. But again, just my opinion. I mean, I'd like to see people enter into East Norwalk, look at the building and say, wow.
Well, I think it's got a significant amount more detail on it than most of what is typically proposed on these types of buildings. The front porches, the dental moldings, moldings in general, column caps. There's a lot of, if it was Victorian, I'd call it gingerbread, but there's a lot of stuff being applied to try and make it fit in and emulate the vocabulary of these coastal New England towns and villages that we see. So there is effort being spent there, and we'll be working to further refine that and define it as the application progresses. So it's as you may know, you get into these ideas and you formulate your thoughts about what these buildings and the character of these volumes wants to be, and things develop and they progress, and it's a lot to get all the paint on the canvas all at once. So we usually take it in layers, and I think there's at least another layer or two that you're going to see in the course of this application.
Well, I look forward to seeing a more mature version of what you presented tonight.
Yeah, this is Brian Bexon. I think that's very important as well. Many people are feeling this is a relatively massive development which overshadows a lot of the cemetery and the feeling of East Norwalk, even though I know you've taken a lot of pains to, as you say, to detail it a lot more than some people understand. I think there needs to be also more public access if possible as well, although I imagine you're anticipating many of the local population accessing it by footpath. But again, the feeling that the scale is just over the top a little is very much felt at the moment in the East Norwalk area by those I've talked to or heard from.
Well, I can speak to that just quickly, but I think no matter whose proposition you'd be looking at on this site, with the existing zoning that recently got approved, the height limitation is 3.5 stories, and there's no hiding that somebody's going to want to develop a 3.5-story building where they're allowed to. And you combo that with, as I mentioned, this is a prominent site at fronting on the entire south end of what is a historic town green. You're going to get a building that reads as important, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It helps to define the space and provide a better overall public realm. I wouldn't think it's going to be appear larger than the Ludlow School that's on the east side of the building, which is another large mass on the building, or on the green there. So I think it's a good fit for the site. I think I don't think you'd get anything different from other proposals, really. It's like somebody is going to look at this site and they're going to want to build it as best they can, and it makes sense if you study the fine-grained development in the area and the other communities up and down the shoreline that have these greens, that you would get structures of this nature and broken up. So just to speak to kind of some of the East Norwalk vocabulary that we referenced, these are the forms that we drew from, which are all in the neighborhood up and down East Avenue. And then we struggled to find the right transition between members, and one of the places we looked to was Guilford, Connecticut, if any of you have been there, and some of these other places where these structures do exist, and you can reference what has grown organically over time. And a lot of these places have larger buildings and manor houses that may have fronted on greens initially, and then they grow closer together as the years progress. So what may have started as several discrete buildings just kind of get closer and closer together, and that's what we tried to emulate with these recesses and this articulation of the facade, and also the varied roof lines is something that really grew over time, and we're hoping it's gonna read like that in the end. So there's a little bit more differentiation in the horizontal street line than reads in this elevation right now, and we look forward to coming back with renderings that better convey that.
Matt, is this picture we're looking at, is this wrapping around the whole front of the property? I'm trying to understand what I'm looking at here.
Yeah, so this is the Cemetery Street elevation where the grade changes is the greatest. The building up on the still my highlighter up here. Lost my mouse.
I'm sorry, I had some difficulty hearing that last part.
Yeah, so
No, sorry,
yeah,
I said I lost my mouse. So this building that fronts on East Avenue up here, as well as the corner of Cemetery Street, is going to read obviously less intensely than the one further down the slope because of the grade change, and there's really no getting around that. So that is turns the corner and does proceed down East Avenue with that vocabulary, but then it opens up to the public plaza, and then it transitions to the real estate office that's on the other side of the property going down East Avenue. And then the Italianate.
Where would that real estate office be?
Yep. Colin, you want to go back to Colin, just highlight the frontage that the elevation was depicting from East Avenue down to the leasing office.
So that was this frontage right here.
That's what that elevation was depicting along Cemetery
Yep.
Street.
Okay.
So you're looking that way. And then it does wrap around here to the public facing, and then here continues the brick vocabulary of that building. And then we wrap the Italianate structure around there. And then this is also the little Georgian house.
And where's the drainage easement that you were talking about?
That's this space.
Okay.
Yeah.
It kind of goes all the way down the side.
Yeah, technically the easement does give us the ability to kind of build over that easement, but we decided to not even attempt to try to do that and satisfy all the requirements.
I just didn't remember the front of the property being that straight, but I guess it is. It always seemed like it was kind of going around a round corner there, but maybe not.
Oh, yeah, there's a fair amount of radius in this area.
Yes.
is that the motion on to Gregory Boulevard?
Correct. Yeah, and we're working with TMP and city staff to figure out what the best way to address this area is. They do have a master plan that they shared with us for this, and integrating into that, they're trying to do some stuff with the walk bridge and with the bicycle network. There is a community connectivity grant that's going to provide an east-west bicycle route along 136. It's also part of the East Coast Greenway. So in terms of a bike infrastructure point of view, that's good. This is also a conduit that's going to take people off of Fort Point Street and bring them onto sorry, not Fort Point, Van Zant, and bring them probably down Gregory and onto the beach or over onto Old Saugatuck as they head towards Westport, or even up onto Winfield and down 136 as they continue on their way.
Yeah, and currently, and we're showing some crosswalks here. It's a kind of evolving conversation with TMP, but currently there's no or very few kind of crosswalks and no sidewalk kind of wrapping the cemetery. And between the TMP's plans and our coordination, there should be some improvement to that pedestrian experience as people try to navigate the neighborhood and potentially walk to the train station and other places.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, I'm not sure whether to address to Mr. Gother or Mr. Evertson, but you mentioned that the impervious surfaces will be reduced. Do you know by what percent from what the bank currently is to what your proposed plan is? What the percent of reduction is, or what is impervious at this point with your plan?
I think there is a reduction. I think the bigger thing is that I don't have the numbers on is the quality of the reduction, right? So it's like one of the big things is that right now it's just currently a huge asphalt parking lot, and we haven't calculated the softscape that's available on the plaza and the catchment areas versus the green space that's available. But as it sits, it is a reduction in the impervious surface. But the other thing is one of the village the EVTZ zone regs is that we're taking advantage of one of the points is the impervious pavement in the parking area that is exposed. So we'd be using that. So that would be technically impervious. And then you also have the softscape, which is going to be landscape nicer than the shrubs that are there today. And then also the resident plaza and the roof drainage. So that's all going to go to the stormwater quality controls that are prescribed by the drainage manuals that DPW puts out and zoning has us follow. And they're going to follow best practices. So it's going to be treated much better to a more current standard than it's currently being done today.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull up it. That the answer to your question is in our engineering report. I'm trying to pull it up, and I do remember it does not include. So there's a reduction, but that reduction it does not include the pervious pavement that we're proposing, or kind of the landscaped courtyard structure that will kind of further reduce that pervious. That just wasn't included in the calculation. But before we conclude, I can find the information. I'll chime in.
Okay, thank you. Because clearly the building or buildings cover up a lot more of the lot, but and then are these apartments going to be rentals or condominiums?
It currently planned as rentals.
Okay, and so your proposal is for 77 units, and is that like approximately 25 units on each floor? And is it one floor through? These look like distinct buildings from the front, but how are you dividing that up?
Yeah, so it's a shared corridor, shared elevators. Even though the facade, makes it appear as there's a series of buildings, the building functions as one. And the first level doesn't have as many apartments because it shares the floor plate with retail and amenity space.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second and third level. I don't know the counts, Colin. I'm not sure you have it, but those levels are probably closer to upper 20s per
Yeah.
floor. And then,
it's around 20.
And then that third floor,
25.
as you see from the elevation, that third floor does include in some areas, not all the areas, but to add the articulation that Colin mentioned, and to take advantage of the 3.5 stories that are allowed in certain areas. We do have lofts on some of these units, and that's where you get some of the bigger units that we show that are 3 and 4 bedrooms.
Okay, and then, thank you. And then what about, you mentioned the real estate office, but is that sort of a passive retail use? Do you anticipate like real retail? And so people will be living above this retail, so
Right.
there'll be cars coming in and out, and
Right.
what
That's
sort of stores do you see going in there?
So Colin, I'll take this. Colin's reference to the real estate office is this adjacent parcel. He was just trying to, I think, orient you guys.
Oh,
It's not
okay.
part of this application. It's just there's a big sign that says real estate on it. So I think that was his reference. Now,
Okay.
this corner space we definitely envision as more active. Potentially spilling out into the public courtyard, or we do have kind of this kind of covered passageway that should be wide enough to not only allow access in addition from East Avenue, but through the building from Cemetery Street. But potentially there's some opportunities for outdoor but covered dining if the ultimate tenant of that space needs kind of that type of use.
How large is that public courtyard?
I believe it's around 4,000 or 5,000 feet.
Yeah, I believe so.
You have
Okay.
the breakdown between
Back.
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just want to kind of echo Mr. Schulman's observation that when you showed us the front schematic, I mean, it does look rather huge, and maybe it's by comparison that there's a little bank there right now and the rest of the space is open, but visually it's rather imposing, I guess is a good word. So I think as we're thinking about this, we just want to kind of keep in mind the scale of the other buildings in the neighborhood. And I know these are the new East Norwalk zoning regs, the 3.5 stories, but
Yeah, so just to kind of echo that, one of your regulations for single family houses, your height to midpoint is typically 30 to 35 feet, depending on what zone you're in. So this is no different. So it can't be built to a height it's essentially higher than a large single family house in most of your zones.
What's the acreage of the property?
I think it's 1.5 acres, Matt, or close to it.
About 1.66 acres.
Okay, so you could ostensibly have 3 big houses on something like that if it was single family zone. Okay, thank you.
Do you all have the breakdown of units? The 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, 4 bedroom? It sounds like you're going as high as.
Yeah, sure. So 1 bedrooms, and this includes a couple of studios, not many, but 1 bedrooms and studios is there's 39. 2 bedrooms, there's 22. There'll be 13 3-bedroom units. And we're able to, based on with those lofts, allow for 3 4-bedroom units, which are larger units than we typically propose. But we think there's a demand for it, and the neighborhood should be able to support that.
And I believe you're including for 10% affordable housing, workplace housing, workplace.
Correct. Yeah, per the regulations, we're providing the workforce housing, on site within those 77 units.
Excuse me, what is the price point that you're aiming for with these apartments?
Yeah, it's gonna be determined by the market.
In the top range, or is it a mid-market kind of development?
Yeah, so it's going to be determined by the market. We're not shooting for the top of the market, but it's going to be a Class A product, and the rents probably will reflect that.
I don't know if you were planning on hitting this later on, but can we go through a little bit the traffic changes that you guys were talking about that you're in the talks with the city, and sort of those, which ones you sort of, or if any of them do you deem like must do before you guys break ground?
So Colin, you want to flip back to the site plan?
Yeah, sure.
Nick, while they do that, there's action that we're going to be taking this evening. We're going to, or I'm going to ask you to authorize an outside peer review of the architecture and an outside peer review of the traffic as well. Please go ahead. I apologize for interrupting.
So we're the curb line on kind of this subject property side of Cemetery Street is not being altered. So any of the kind of restriping or working of these on-street parking spaces or the bike lane, that's not a requisite. I think it's a nice addition, but it's not a requisite for this project. The kind of left sweep as you're coming down Cemetery and looking to go back north towards 95, that's getting altered slightly based on the recommendation of our traffic engineer. Currently, if you drive by there, kind of the trailers of trucks kind of hop the curb, so the radius just isn't sufficient. And as part of that, we're kind of shifting it slightly to align with our proposed curb cut here. So that's probably the more critical one. If for some reason that doesn't get worked out, even though it probably should, regardless of this, or regardless of the action of this site plan would have to change slightly and probably move this curb cut probably further up, closer to mid-block, and maybe only access it kind of through the facade, break up the facade, and get direct access into the garage, which probably eliminates the possibility or greatly reduces the possibility for some of this on-street parking based on that curb cut and sight lines and such. And Colin, if I missed anything, pick up from there.
There's so much traffic that goes bombing by that site just in a hurry to get down to the beach this time of the year. I would hope that TMP would take that into consideration and maybe even tee it off and make a stop sign or something there, I would hate to lose the green triangle, but maybe they can redo it.
Yeah, so
it's not a speedway.
yeah, that actually was discussed, and our consultants, before even presented it to TMP or the city, said that a stop sign wouldn't be approved, mainly because the site, traffic generation generated by this site wouldn't warrant a stop sign. But I think TMP is working on kind of some traffic calming and maybe specifically reducing the speed limit, through this stretch. That's something we've heard through some conversations of late.
How
If we
far
can-
back on East Avenue is your traffic study going to go?
Well, I know they went back and forth with Mr. Travers at TMP. I'll get back to you on that one. It was relatively extensive, but I don't want to mistake that.
Thank you.
And Steve, if we can get whatever TMP is thinking they're actually going to propose in here or do in the near term, that'd be helpful as well.
Yeah, we can get that in any, and this goes for the design, site layout questions and or the traffic. If you have specific questions or concerns, please get them to me. We can have, when we get to Mr. Schulman's point, when we get to the discussion of the peer review, we can forward those on to our consultants and have them consider that as well.
So can I ask the presenters if they've also got an outline for the proposal to basically make the exit and ingress to the midpoint of the current building, of the future building, sorry. Is there a design according to that layout?
We have a very preliminary sketch.
Okay.
Yeah. So that, I think that's probably the worst case backup scenario if some of these offsite improvements aren't deemed acceptable.
Thank you.
And there's that, your proposed building is a retail space, right?
Correct. Yeah, Colin, if you have a cursor, yeah. So on the corner of Cemetery and East, that's retail. And then down kind of as you bend around to Gregory, that ground level is proposed as commercial, whether it's retail, service, or potentially office.
Thank you.
Well, any other questions before we move on to our action items? All right. Steve, I assume we can do this as a single item?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay,
that's
then I'd like to have a motion to approve the hiring of a consultant for an outside architectural peer review and for an outside peer review of the traffic. And Richard moves. Is there a second? And Brian seconds. Let's do a roll call on it.
Okay, I'll just go by who I see on my screen. If that's okay. Ms. Jordan Byron,
Yes.
Mr. Cantor,
Yes.
Ms. Wells,
Yes.
Mr. Rowena,
Yes.
Ms. Langalis. Did you, I'm sorry, Tammy, I didn't get your,
Yeah, I did say yes. Sorry.
oh, sorry, thank you.
Sorry.
Mr. Mushak,
Yes.
Mr. Baxendale,
Yes.
and I don't see anybody else. I'm just going to go with Mr. Schulman.
Mr. Williams.
Yes.
Oh, Mr. Thank you. That's a
All
yes.
right. And I'm yes also. All right, so it again passes unanimously.
And we'll confirm, we'll work with the applicant on, as the process unfolds, and I imagine they'll probably come back an additional time before the public hearing to update you on progress from whether it's design or the traffic or whatever elements you would like to go over.
I'd like to say something here just for a moment. In that for many years, I've thought that the traffic flow around the cemetery being one way was a 1960s car-oriented approach to move the greatest volume of traffic at the highest speed through the area. That's how we ended up with a 4-lane highway going to the beach, which led to great speeds until we put the bike lanes in and reduced the speeds. I think it's a lot more manageable now with enforcement. But in any case, the cemetery circumference, to me, would always work better from what I've seen, just with my background as a landscape architect, as a 2-way traffic instead of 1-way, and roundabouts at the corners. And I know TMP is looking at all options, and I am not ever going to pretend to be a traffic engineer. And I have all the trust in the world with Jim Travers for what his abilities and vision is. So, but I'm just going to say that I would hope that we would seriously consider restoring 2-way traffic, getting that's traffic calming right there, because people tend to go slower when there's 2 lanes opposing each other. And with all the other benefits of that, more options when traffic backs up to take alternate routes, splitting the traffic flow in 2 directions around the cemetery instead of having it all in one going in one direction, which of course leads to higher speeds. I've been trapped on that cemetery perimeter road, whatever has different names, Gregory and various East Avenue, the Gregory Cemetery. And I'm not sure if it changes names at the top, but that I've been trapped on that going, and sometimes if the lights are green, going 40 miles an hour all around me when I'm on a bicycle. And it's scary. Anyway, I'm just going to say that to me, an integral part of this project is going to be solving the traffic flow. Obviously, it's been mentioned already, but I just want to reiterate how important that is from a long-range vision view of that neighborhood. Thank you.
Mike, we'll pass that on to the reviewer.
Thank you.
All right. Continuing with our agenda, can I have a motion from those who are present to approve the minutes of the June 2nd meeting? And Richard has moved to approve them. Is there a second? And Tammy has seconded. I think we can do this by a show of hands. All those in favor?
I have not read them yet. Sorry.
Okay, that's all right. You'll abstain.
Yes.
Then it's unanimous with 1 abstention.
2.
2 abstentions? Okay. Darius and JJ abstain. Everyone else approves. Comments of the director, Steve?
No, just a reminder, our next meeting is the 28th. You have that special meeting for 32 Weed Ave. We may add a couple small things to the agenda, maybe not, but just a reminder, staff memo and stuff will come out
Right.
when we get closer.
Okay.
Hey, say that date again. I'm sorry. Just want to make sure.
The 28th, which I believe is a Tuesday.
Yes, it is. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
I have that in my calendar already.
What time is that, Steve?
6 p.m.
Thank you. And it'll be Zoom.
Yes. Sorry. But yes.
Thank you. Just checking.
Any comments from members of the commission?
I just had a question. Steve, how's the affordable housing, like Norwalk's response to the affordable housing plan coming along?
So we had put out the RFP. We surprisingly, we only got 1 response to that, which was pretty shocking overall. But we've been working with some folks on council and the mayor's office as well. And we interviewed that firm, and the interview went pretty well, so we're going to recommend going with that firm. So that'll have to go through the approval process. And then that, the study will take place, and there'll be a committee formed to look at that. And that'll probably start in earnest, I'd say September, maybe.
Gotcha. Cool. Thank you.
Sure.
Anything else from, go ahead, Tammy.
Thank you. Steve, let's just say this building goes through with the 77 units and, the 10% affordable, and then we got the North 7 with the 10% available. If every new development that's for a rental does the 10%, do we stay within our guidelines of 10% affordable within the city, or are we creeping our way out because we're adding so many more units? I know it's a percent, but do you understand my question?
Yeah, it doesn't, it's not going to move the needle much one way or the other. With this project, if you look at the, not to really get into the details of the project, but they had proposed, there's a clause in the existing workforce housing regulations. If you do a 3-bedroom affordable unit, it counts as 2. So technically they're dropping that percent down by I think we were at 13.5 the last round. So we'd be at 13.49 or something like that. So it's really, these developments we're not going to move much within the parameters. We'll maintain that 12.5 to 13.5 percentage.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Sure, Mike.
Not to extend the evening, I have got a beautiful ribeye sitting downstairs just waiting for me. So I am dying to get out of here. But the affordable housing number, we're never going to be below 10%, I don't think. There's just no possible way. But one of the well, you know what? I'm going to ask this question the next time. This is not the right time. I'm sorry. Tammy's question was very good, and it started a conversation in my head, but I'm going to hold off. So cancel that.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? There are several seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Have a good evening. See you on the 28th.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Well,